Afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I'm Ruth Shelley, president of the Rotary Club of Portland. Welcome to our live weekly membership meeting. As our banner says, Rotary opens opportunities to find solutions for today's challenges. Healing from the pandemic, recovery from the economic downturn, and peace building as we seek racial justice. This week, we focus on door number 2, economic recovery, as we hear from Milwaukee Mayor Mark Gamba on transportation investments, both locally and regionally. But first, let's welcome Rotarian Mari Bunich for our reflection. Mari?
Thank you, President Ruth, and hello, fellow Rotarians. This afternoon, I'd like to share with you the idea that there is joy to be found in every moment if you just know how to look. In the Book of Joy, which chronicles conversations between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, author Douglas Abrams writes, "Acceptance allows us to move into the fullness of joy. It allows us to engage with life on its own terms rather than rail against the fact that life is not as we would wish. It allows us not to struggle against the day-to-day current." The Dalai Lama had told us that stress and anxiety come from our expectations of how life should be. When we're able to accept that life is how it is, not as we think it should be, we are able to ease the ride, to go from that bumpy axle with all its suffering, stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction to the smooth axle with its greater ease, comfort, and happiness. Today, I invite you to switch to the smooth axle. There are some things we can control in life, and there are many, many things we cannot. So, as we continue through the end of this year, let's focus on bringing more joy into our lives by spending a few moments each day reflecting on the little things that made you smile. Maybe it was the smell of your coffee in the morning or the changing color of the leaves. And pretty soon you'll see that there is joy all around.
Thank you, Mari. If any of you would like to give the reflection at an upcoming meeting, please let us know or fill out the link provided in the chat box. Mari, I am struck by your reflection on things that we can't control. And before we go on, I wanted to let you know that our fellow Rotarian Barol Yasalata just informed me that our fellow Rotarian Chick Urzarumlu passed away yesterday after battling COVID for 10 days. Chick was the founding dean of the College of Engineering at PSU, a valued member of the community, and he joined our club in 1987. May he rest in peace, and we extend our sympathies to all of Chick's family and friends. Let's just take a brief moment to remember Chick and everything that he meant to us. Welcome to any virtual guests who are joining us today, and thank you for tuning into our weekly meeting. Please introduce yourself in the chat box, where you'll find a link to guest registration. We're eager for you to fill it out so that we can stay in touch. And now, it's October, hard to believe. I'd like to extend a happy birthday to everyone with birthdays this month. We alternate each week honoring birthdays and Rotary anniversaries. Please note the names of these birthday people and reach out to one of them with a call or email, especially since traditional celebrations are limited right now. It looks like we've got a great crop of October birthday people. Congratulations to you all. And now, please welcome back Rotarian Mari Bunich to announce an upcoming service opportunity. Mari?
Thank you again, President Ruth. Hello, I am super excited to be here to tell you about a new activity we have coming up, the Rotary Week of Service, which will be held Monday, October 26th through Friday, October 30th. This week of service is designed that just because, as President Ruth mentioned, we're still socially distant, it doesn't mean that we Rotarians are any less socially active. Each day of the week will have a different theme and a variety of easy ways for you to serve your community, either by getting out and about or by staying safely at home. Our goal is that every one of our members participates in at least one service activity during the week of service, and some of these are as easy as buying a gift card to support a local business. We'll have opportunities for all of our members to share photos of their service activities, and we may even have a few prizes for our most involved members. So please check out Spokes later this week for more details, and we look forward to serving with you during the Rotary Week of Service.
Thank you, Mari. A great reminder for us all that service doesn't stop, even though the pandemic has stopped many other activities. And now please welcome Rotarian Nihad Awira to give us an update on the annual golf tournament. Nihad?
Here we are. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick reminder, and I promise this is the last time you will see my face this week. And maybe next week, after Monday, you'll be happy not to see me after that. Our event will be October 12th at Oregon Golf Club in the Stafford area, West Lynn. It will include lunch and golf, driving range, putting. We are not going to be socially distanced, but we are going to be physically distanced. It is much better than seeing each other, waving at each other, and being able to play golf and socialize with each other with a physical distance between us, not the social distance. I hope you guys can make it. We still have some space. So do well, be well, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Nihad. We're always happy to see your face. And now on to an announcement regarding Business Exchange. Signups are now available for this season's virtual Business Exchange. We're grateful to our hosts this year. There are 4: Brandon Sackett with Landscape East and West, Carol Salter with Easter Seals of Oregon, Dan Bramsky with EMA Architects, and Maria Schell with Oregon State University. Siobhan has added the link in the chat to sign up, or you can find more information on our website. So again, remember, Business Exchange coming up, please sign up via the chat. Now we're going to enter a virtual tabletop. In a few moments, all of us will disappear and then reappear in a virtual room with just a few other Rotarians. If you don't know each other, please introduce yourselves. A minute or so before you come back to this main meeting, you'll get a visual heads up. And you never have trouble finding things to talk about, but may I suggest a topic for your breakout room to get you going? Since we're about to hear about transportation today, please share a story about a recent trip you were able to take safely within COVID-19 guidelines. Here we go. And now on to our program. After our speaker today is finished, if you'd like to ask Mark a question, Maria will moderate the question and answer through the chat box. And now, please welcome Rotarian Will Nolan as today's chair of the day. Will?
Well, hello, everybody. Boy, do I like these chat rooms. That's probably the highlight. No offense to the speakers, but that's probably the highlight of the meeting for me, is getting to one-on-one finally again with folks in Rotary. I sure miss you guys. But the second best thing today is Mark, and I'd like to introduce Mark to you. Mayor Mark is the mayor of Milwaukee, which is if you're unfamiliar, it's a city, a suburb of Portland with about 20,000 people, and it's kind of east of the Willamette River and heading out towards 205. He's been the mayor there since 2015, and prior to that, he was on the city council for a few years. Mark grew up in Colorado and has been out here for 20-some years, and his job was as a photographer traveling around the world for various magazines, including National Geographic. So those beautiful pictures that you see in the National Geographic magazines some of those were his. Today, I'm really anxious to hear what he has to say about transportation, especially from the perspective of a Milwaukee mayor, because of the location of Milwaukee, with people going there, commuting into Portland, and then traversing, going back and forth to other places that pass right through there. And we all know that it's a contentious issue because it's very expensive, and it's something that is unknowable what the future is going to bring in terms of transportation needs. So I'm very, very anxious to hear what he has to say. So let's get to it. Mark, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Will, and President Shelley. I appreciate being invited to this meeting. I wish that we were all in person and I was getting to enjoy lunch with you all and all of that. But I'll get right into this because there's a lot to talk about, and I'm sure there'll be questions. So I actually ran for city council about 8 years ago, specifically because of climate change. As Will said, I was a National Geographic photographer and was seeing the effects of climate change occurring all around the world, and I've been seeing it for years. And since I know how that plays out, or have a pretty good idea how that plays out, and I wasn't seeing politicians really at any level digging into it as deeply as we should be, I ran for council because I wasn't a millionaire and couldn't run for president. So I've been on the council 8 years, mayor 5 years. In that time, I led the city to create a new vision for the city. The opening line of that vision says, in 2040, Milwaukee is a flourishing city that is entirely equitable, delightfully livable, and completely sustainable. So the next step we took after we created that vision was to create a climate action plan. And we wrote one of the most aggressive climate action plans in the state. And then this last January, we declared a climate state of emergency and made it more aggressive by 5 years based on what the UN reports were telling us. Those had come out after we had finished our climate action plan. Obviously, a big part of stopping climate change is our transportation systems. In the state of Oregon, the biggest piece of our carbon footprint or greenhouse gas footprint is transportation. So I've been engaged in that both in my city, at the Clackamas County level, at the metro level, and to some degree advocating at the state level. In Milwaukee, we did something extraordinary, I think. We passed, after a great deal of work with the rest of the citizens, a lot of outreach, a lot of back and forth. We passed what we call a SAFE program. And we will be investing $52 million over 9 years in sidewalks, greenways, safe crossings, multi-use paths. And by the end of those 9 years, we will have the only ADA compliant city in the state. That is being paid for by a $4.85 a month charge on the water bill that the citizens agreed to. When we didn't go to a vote, but we did a lot of outreach and a lot of town halls and that sort of work. And when that hit the bill the first time, we got 2 angry phone calls. So obviously we had done our work beforehand. So when I was asked to be on the committee, the Metro Committee, I jumped at the chance because I knew that one of the many things that will affect climate going forward is the transportation system here in the metro regions. And we, I think that I have a slideshow to show you that has more details. But generally speaking, the committee had an agreement that we worked on at the very beginning to prioritize essentially 4 things: safety, equity, climate, and then congestion or ease of transportation, however you want to frame that. And those were the things that we were concentrating on as we worked through this. And this was a very broad ranging group of people. So not any one group got everything they wanted. It is not as strong a climate package as I would have liked. Myself and a couple of the other mayors were pushing for it to be a much more robust package than it is. But it is what it is, and I think it's good. It's certainly a good first step. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can use this slideshow. All right. So, oops, sorry, technology. So there were 35 members on the task force. We met 22 times over 16 months. They were not short meetings. They were 2.5, 3-hour meetings. We heard from community members at virtually every single one. And we did a lot of polling, a lot of outreach. So this has been, again, a pretty robust process. We know, and I've actually heard other data that we are worse than the 14th most congested city in the country, but at least some data points say that we're the 14th most congested city in the country. We know that this region, the metro region, is growing leaps and bounds. Even during the last economic downturn, people continued to move here, even without jobs. And we know that this will continue. We know that the Pacific Northwest is one of the areas that will have less climate effects, although I think you will all recognize after the, whatever it was, 10 days of horrific smoke from the fires, that it will not be nothing. That was a tiny little taste of what climate change, catastrophic climate change, will look like. But in any case, we will continue to have people move here. The estimation is 500,000 people in over the next 20 years. And 2,000 people a month are coming to this region. So here's the 17 corridors we were working on. One of those, of course, is the light rail line out to Tigard. And then all of the rest of these are major arterials that I think most of you will recognize. Some of the funding is just planning money, like Highway 212 Sunrise. That's simply planning money. Other areas, there's significant safety features, but you can see the various. I'm not going to read at you all of these things. It'll take forever. 115 to 120 miles of roadway improvement, 60 miles of roadway planning, 25 miles of new bus lanes. I think something that I strongly believe in is that you cannot fix congestion by building your way out of it. You can't build enough highway lane miles to solve congestion. Los Angeles has learned that the hard way. Atlanta has learned that the hard way. You have to have multiple ways for people to get to work, for people to get to school, for people to get to the places they're going. So creating a robust transportation system that's safe, that's efficient, is the key. And I think light rail is a piece of that. We could be doing having a much better bus system than we currently have, one that would be faster, more efficient. And then bike ped, Milwaukee or the Portland metro region is one of the 2 best biking cities in the country, and we don't even touch what places like Amsterdam do with bicycles. That dramatically decreases traffic, and it takes a whole lot less infrastructure to move a bunch of bicyclists than it does a bunch of cars. So there's a lot of things that we can be doing to modernize our transportation system. A big piece of it, as I said, was safety. We lose a lot of people. 35 people a year, roughly, are killed. 512 in 2018 were injured badly, like life-changing injuries. And 40% of all congestion is actually caused by crashes. So safety is not just safety. It's not just keeping people alive. It's also a way to make our systems more efficient. A big piece of this is 40 to 45 miles of new sidewalk in places where there aren't sidewalk. I'm sure you can all name a major road like 82nd Avenue where there are parts of that that don't have sidewalks. And trying to get people the ability to move just a few blocks to go from their home to go shop or get to school or things like that. If they could walk, many people would do it. And so making it safe allows more people to walk. Safe crossings are the same thing. Street lights, also a big safety piece. And then 130 to 140 miles of improved bikeways. An important thing to think about in this is that if we do not pass this measure, we will lose out on a great deal of federal funding. It's $2 billion in federal matching funds towards the next light rail line. And we will not get that if we do not pass this because we will not have our match for that. So we're required to pony up a certain, and I forget what the percentage is these days, but we're required to pony up a certain percentage. Without this measure, we will not have that. Most of the businesses are actually exempt from this tax. It is just the largest businesses in the region that are being taxed by this. We actually, in the process, we didn't get to make the decision about how the funding for this would come about. Our intention was for there to be multiple streams, a variety of streams of funding, which is what Seattle did, which is what LA and Denver all did. And their packages are much bigger. Their processes are more robust. But because of other measures that passed recently, because of things that happened at the state level down in Salem, more and more of the opportunities for us to diversify the funding were taken away. So it is what it is now. The $4 returned for every dollar spent on transportation infrastructure, that's, folks doing that work that then spend that money in their communities, buying groceries, going out to dinner, buying clothes, doing all the things that they do because they have a good paying job. Roughly $4 billion of estimated total construction spending, roughly 37,000 construction jobs, direct and indirect, and an average income is a good family wage income for these folks doing that work. And that's critical. I think you'll recognize during this pandemic, we are seeing a lot of people that are will be losing their homes once the moratoriums are up because for years they have been paying 50% of their income or more for their rent or their mortgage because they don't have good family wage jobs. And when they didn't get 6 months of income, they're in big trouble right now. So seeing more family wage jobs in our region is critical. And this is another thing we know, that people of color are more likely to be hit or killed by a car while walking or biking or driving, to live in places that aren't adequately served by transit, to be exposed to higher levels of toxic traffic pollution, and to experience a higher risk of asthma and other respiratory problems. It's just a fact, and it's unfortunate, but I think it's past time that we begin to address some of those things. And 60% of the corridor investments are located where higher concentrations of people of color live. So we have invested historically not in those neighborhoods. We've invested all of these things, walkable sidewalks, bike lanes, all that stuff has been invested in neighborhoods that tend to be more white. So again, it's past time to do this work. And my big reason for being on the committee, cleaner air, healthier climate, transit is a big piece to reducing greenhouse gases, more choices, more ways for people to get around. Part of this will help TriMet buy electric buses, replace some of their diesel buses with electric buses. And that's a critical piece. They are the #1 user of diesel in the state. And starting to move them away from that very dirty fuel is important. So, and there's a short list actually of people that are supporting this measure because they understand how important it is. And I think you'll see that that's a broad range from businesses to unions to all kinds of people are involved, and environmental groups. So we're hoping that leaders like you will help with this, that will endorse, that spread the word, help people, make sure that people get out and vote, and they vote all the way down the ballot, not just that top ticket item. And the measure is 26218. So that's the slideshow. I assume there's going to be lots of questions. So I will, how do I unshare? Corinne, can you unshare me? There you go. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Mark.
Thank you so much, Mayor Gamba. We are going to start our Q&A for you. And actually, we're going to kickstart today with our first question is from President Ruth Shelley. Ruth?
Well, thank you, Mark, for your wonderful presentation. There's always a tension between wanting to serve low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of people of color with great transportation, but then the construction at the same time causes them to be displaced. And I noticed on one of your slides, you talked about anti-displacement strategies, and I was wondering what those were.
Well, more broadly speaking, there are things within this that go to that, but I want to talk about a broader strategic thing that we did. You'll remember a few years back that we passed, all of us passed a bond measure to build affordable housing. We did it in that order on purpose. We did it at the urging, frankly, of several mayors. Originally, we were going to do the transportation bill first and then the housing bill, or at least that's where the movers and shakers were headed. But we pushed to do the opposite because of the experience that places like Milwaukee had, where the light rail line came in and then the rents skyrocketed because it was now a place that you could live and go jump on the light rail line and be at your job downtown in 18 minutes. And so we knew that that is likely to happen. Any place that we invest, we make transit better. So we decided to pass the housing bond measure first. Part of the housing bond measure allows us to, first of all, buy existing affordable housing so that those rents can't go up. So then it's now controlled by a government agency that deals with affordable housing, and that will vary depending on where that is. But then we can hold the rents down to affordable rates. So that was a big piece, plus being able to sort of prefetch and buy property along those lines to be able to build more affordable housing along those lines. So it's not just you know, folks with really great jobs that get to live next to a light rail line. That's the bigger, more powerful piece of it. There are parts of this that go to that, but it gets pretty technical pretty fast.
Thank you, Mayor Gamba. Jim Parker, Rotarian, has our next question. Jim?
Thank you. Setting aside the federal funding that you mentioned, have you seen any metrics in all the work that you've done that tell us whether increased sustainability is positively or negatively correlated with economic growth, and to what degree?
I have not seen statistics that I can pull out of my head that go to that question. I would actually turn it on its ear and answer it this way, that cities, regions that don't prepare to become more, that aren't more prepared for climate change, that aren't doing the things that we know that we all have to do to stop climate change, are going to be cities that fail as the years go on. So I think rather than causing growth per se, I would say that it's going to maintain the possibility of functionality, period.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Rotarian Danielle Banks.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Mayor. My question, I think, is a follow-on to Jim's. I'm curious, given the map that you showed us with the circles around urban areas and where roadways connect, et cetera, where do you see the most growth happening because of leaders in those areas really paying attention to the needs that you suggested in your PowerPoint? So like I live at the intersection of 26 and 217. And of course, that's a smaller area than Portland or some others. And I know from West Side conversations, the areas that are typically growing, but I don't know where the local governments are in the various areas around the metro area that are really paying attention, as you're suggesting you've done in Milwaukee.
Right. So there's a variety of ways to answer that. Some of it has to do with the urban growth boundary, right? There are cities that have a great deal of undeveloped space that they can develop, and they will be growing rapidly regardless of what they do in this realm. Happy Valley, I think, is a perfect example. And it's the reason that I argued, even as an environmentalist, a lot of people were a little angry at me because I actually argued for funding for planning for the Sunrise Corridor, even though a lot of environmentalists would say no new roads, period. We need to cause transportation to shift away from single occupancy vehicles. I said, look, that growth is going to occur in that area, whether we like it or not. If we plan and we build the first road in this region that actually has a dedicated rapid bus lane built into the road as it's being planned, that will be environmentally a lot more sound than trying to go in after the fact and build a transportation system that is something other than automobiles. But Hillsborough is doing a lot of great work on this. Beaverton is. Obviously, Portland is doing some really interesting things. I think the infill areas, the areas that, like Milwaukee, we don't have a lot of greenfield, but we are getting we are having more construction, more building right now than we've had in the previous 40 years combined. And it's because of the work we're doing, partly because of the light rail, but people are recognizing that we are planning to create a city that will be high functioning and very livable while being able to support a higher density. And I think, so it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Sorry.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Rotarian Dev Dion. Dev?
Had to unmute. Question, are there any examples of cities who have succeeded in the way that you are proposing in the United States? Or are we out on the bleeding edge?
No, we are certainly not on the bleeding edge. I don't know if you caught this, but Los Angeles, I'm trying to remember what the number was. It was over $1 billion. It was like several $billion, I want to say $20 billion transportation package that they passed a while back. And it's predominantly to build light rail and bike ped infrastructure, because they recognize that adding 2 more lanes to an already 16-lane freeway is not going to solve the problem. And it certainly doesn't address climate change. So they are doing a big package. They're probably, what, 3-4 years ahead of us. Seattle also did a big package. They're 2 years ahead of us. Denver did a big package. They're a few years ahead of us. You know, it's an interesting thing. We have the perspective of the moment in history that we sit, right? So we see all the roadways we have, we see the things we have, and there's like this, it's always been there, right? That the 224 has always been there, 99E has always been there, I-5 has always been there, but it hasn't. The airport, all of these things were investments that the society at the time chose to make for the various reasons that they chose to make them. We, for the last couple of 3 decades, have sort of abdicated our responsibility for keeping our transportation systems functional, keeping them safe. I mean, there are a lot of bridges in this country that engineers are not thrilled with. The Selwood Bridge was one of those. We replaced that one. So that was the one in the metro region that was the worst. But that is not uncommon. And in my opinion, we need to be building the transportation system for the 21st century now. And this, again, in my personal opinion, was a far smaller package than what we should have done to really get to the place where we had a high functioning transportation system throughout the region that served everybody and served them well and rapidly. People right now, there are people that commute in Portland metro region an hour and a half one way. They live in Gresham, they work out in Beaverton or whatever, and they have to use transit because they can't afford, you know, the gas, the car, all those things. Our transportation systems have been allowed to languor, and I think it's way past time that we be doing something. Like I said, I think this is a good first step. That I can tend to wander off the point of the question sometimes, so if I didn't get to it exactly, please ask me again. I feel like I wandered off on this one.
No, you did great, Mayor. We actually have our final question with our time. It's going to go to Rotarian Scott Burns. Scott?
Thank you very much, Mark. Great presentation. Congratulations to Metro and all of the decisions that are being made based on climate change. I'm a scientist, and I really, it's at my heart for this. But how do you deal with climate deniers? And there are a few people out there that are quite vocal that do not look at the science that is overwhelmingly in favor of that the climate is changing. How do you deal with those people who are saying, I don't want to buy into this because I don't believe in climate change?
Well, much of what I just said a minute ago, you know, their transportation system, you can't just sit with a transportation system and assume that it's going to continue to serve you as your population grows, as your region grows, as technology changes. Changes have to be made, right? We have to continue to move forward. Whether or not you believe in climate change, we still have to get people from point A to point B. Doesn't really matter. What we know for a fact is that building more freeway lane miles, first of all, if your house is one of those houses next to the freeway and they're going to have to tear it down to build that extra lane, you're going to be dramatically opposed to that. I'm fairly certain. Whether or not you're a climate denier. So building transportation systems that will serve us in this coming century, that will serve the most people the best and prepare us for all the things coming, whether or not climate is involved is almost irrelevant, because we have to upgrade, we have to update our transportation systems.
Thank you, Mark. The mark of a good presentation, no pun intended, is that there are more questions than there is time to answer them. And so if any of you have additional questions for Mayor Mark, please put them in the chat. We will get them to him and we'll hope that he can answer them via email. Next week, we'll hear from John Topna, president of Eco Northwest, on the pandemic economy, which relates to everything that we're talking about today. And this meeting will once again be live via Zoom at noon on Tuesday. Well, today I'd like to thank our virtual guests, particularly Nina Carlson, guest of Nancy Lang. Nina was in our breakout group and it was really nice to meet you. Mari, thank you for your reflection and for your invitation to our week of service. And let me interject, thank you all who came on Saturday morning to help with our Rotary Youth Center at Morrison Family Child and Services. It was a wonderful event and I can't tell you how much it meant to me personally to see some of you for real. Nihad, we wish you a successful golf tournament and a beautiful weather on October 12th. We want to see your face one last time to hear how it went. Will, thank you for your introduction of our speaker. And Mayor Mark, thank you for your enlightening presentation, and especially your public service, which has been inspired by our need to curtail climate change. As we enter into a new Rotary Week, please join me in opening the doors of opportunity for healing, for recovery, and for peace building. As Rotarians, we are here to make our world healthier, more sustainable, and with justice for all. Have a good week, everyone, and this meeting is adjourned.